Hello there, greetings everybody. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show dedicated to progressive rock and somewhat to other types of music. Actually, probably more than somewhat, but thought I would try something different tonight. So we're doing the Great Album Challenge. Sunday night Great Album Challenge comes out at 8 o'clock. This is a show that I alternate with Ben's Album Challenge. So basically, Ben provides all the background selections and help with this work, and my job on Ben's Album Challenge is to pick to listen to the album and give my review and pick a favorite song. But on the Great Album Challenge, which alternates every second week, so I do one week, one the other week. On the Great Album Challenge, he selects 10 albums from a selected year, 10 albums that are probably, most likely, are his favorite 10 albums that he likes from that year, and then I rank them. I listen to them and rank them according to how I like them. Most of these albums, more than half of these albums, I own, and I was looking at the list when it came before I ranked it, and there was only one album on this list that I hadn't actually listened to in its entirety at least once before, and that was the one that ended up in last place, but I won't give it away just yet. But the other three albums I listened to as well, the ones that I don't own, just because it's been a while. For most of them I either used to hear them in the old days. They would play the entire album on the radio, so I would listen to it then, or somebody else had it. There was one of these albums somebody else had. I think it was my uncle had this album when I was really little. I was like 6. It's before I even listened to rock music. He owned the entire collection from this band. They were his favorite band, and he played this album once. I don't remember much about it except for the leading title track. So that's my first encounter with some of these albums. So anyways, normally how I do this is he gives me the 10 albums, I listen to them, and I rank them according to how I like them. Now, that doesn't mean these are my favorite albums of 1969. My favorite albums might be a different list of albums, but we wanted to do something different. It's, I can just rank my favorites all the time, but this way I get to listen to somebody else's choices. I learn something new from them. He gets to see how his albums rank with me, and it helps us both in a way. So anyways, without further ado, I don't need my glasses for this episode anyways. I do have 6 props here because these are the ones I did own prior to this video. Okay, so we're going to go basically the way I always go, which is from my least favorite to my most favorite, or number 10 to number 1. And when I say the least favorite, that's exactly what this is. He hasn't given me any albums on this particular list that I don't like. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he gives me albums that he likes but I don't necessarily like, and I will make that note if that happens, but not on this list. All these albums I like. For me, if it's below 50%, it kind of means I don't like it. I may not, it'd have to get down pretty low for me to hate. I can only think of a half dozen albums that I absolutely hate. And I can't even use that word, because in order to hate something you have to have at least loved it at some point, because love and hate are pretty close together. Anyways, I'm not here for the philosophical delivery of how this works. It's just going to rank these albums, and so it'll be from least to most. I'll tell you a little bit about them as I go along as well. So the number 10 on the list is Renaissance for me, their debut. Good album. I've only listened to it its entirety once, which I did today. I think it's a good album. It's an album I definitely would want to explore more. This whole band I'd like to explore more, because I really like Annie Haslam, even though I don't think she's the vocalist on this album. Somebody else is. There's a different girl singing, or a different woman singing on this album. But it's a good album. Lots of piano, which I tend to like if it's mixed in properly. Lots of interesting sounds and noises and orchestral type stuff as well. It's of course progressive, but it's not the British kind of sound progressive. But it's not American sounding either. I don't find this band to be either of those two. They're kind of unique in their own way. They kind of don't fit into either of those categories. They have a little bit of each, but they kind of fit into a different category. It's almost, I almost say this is kind of like operatic kind of progressive rock with some folky stuff in there as well. So it's a pretty good album. My opinions of this band, aren't really that strong yet, mostly because this is actually the first album I've listened to in its entirety by them. I've listened to bits and pieces of some of their other albums, so not a great amount of time with them yet, so that's mostly the reason why they're coming in at 10th for that reason, and if that reason only. Number 9 is from a artist that I like a lot, quite a bit. This is an album I've only experienced once, and then once today, so twice. So I do like some of the tracks on here quite a bit. I think for me, it tends to go. It starts out strong, and this slowly goes down to a certain point. Then it goes down quite a bit more from that. It's Space Oddity from David Bowie. Yeah, I think it's an album, given a chance to listen to it more, probably would go up in my esteem, but I still like it enough to put it ahead of Renaissance, so it's coming in at number 9. Number 8, this is from the Beatles. I think this is more of a movie soundtrack. The album part where they sing and stuff like that, I like that quite a bit, but the added on parts, musical parts to it, not so much. But overall, it's a pretty solid album, enough to finish 8th here. Of course, the first track is, to me, the best track. It's the one Ringo Starr song that I really like. The vocals on that are him singing, and it's the one I like probably the best, actually. So it comes in at number 8. So there's not much separating the bottom 3. They're all pretty close. And the next album's a little bit more than either of those 3, and that's an album from an artist that I don't really listen to too much. He has bits and pieces in his discography, which is immense, that I do listen to. I've listened to bits and pieces of, but this is the first time I've really, well, not the first time, I've had another album that I listened to him by too, but this one is actually the first one I really listened to intently today. And it's good. Like, there's a lot of really good instrumentation on this album. It's more of an instrumental album. There are some vocals on it, but it's primarily an instrumental album. Fantastic guitar, some really good, just some really good stuff on here. Some really good instrumentation. Not as memorable as probably would be. I find with instrumental, because there's no lyrics in it, I tend to not remember them as well as I would like to, so it takes more listening to get that part through. So, and of course, the album number 7 is Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. A good album, when I first seen the last 4 albums here, and knowing how I had such a limited amount of time with each of them, I actually had ranked. I thought this one will probably end up last, but I kind of liked it, and for those of you who have argued with me about Frank Zappa in the past, you'd be happy to know I did like this album. This is maybe the first one of his that I've actually liked. So it came in number 7. And then the number 6 album was one I actually own. It squeaked by. I've had it for a long time. It squeaked by Hot Rats. Probably mostly because I'm a lot more familiar with it. I've listened to it probably in the 50-100 range. Talking about Tommy from The Who. Not one of my favorite Who albums, but a good album. Still a good album. There's enough good stuff on here that it makes it a good album. Some stuff on here that I could care less one way or the other about, but overall, many feel that this is their magnus opus, or one of their best albums. I won't argue that. I think it's one of the best. Definitely deserves to be mentioned here. So number 6, Tommy from The Who. So that's your first 5 albums. All of them pretty close. Not too much separating them. The next album's a little bit of a jump. Not a huge jump, but a little bit of one. and it's fairly new to me. I've listened to its entirety twice now, but I guess I do need my glasses here. But unlike a lot of albums that are new to me, this one here, there's quite a few tracks on it that I'm familiar with, and of course you're talking about the Rolling Stones' "Let It Bleed." I got this last month. If some of you watched my new material stuff that I purchased, "Let It Bleed," "Love in Vain," "Midnight Rambler," "Give Me Shelter," "You Can't Always Get What You Want." Those three tracks, of course, are well known to me. I've listened to them for years. Probably a little burned out, actually, some of them, because I've heard them so many times, but they are part of this album, so it makes it a much stronger album than the other ones, and that's why it's coming up here, even though I've only listened to it its entirety twice. I really like the cake and the little images of them. I was actually looking at the images to see if they kind of corresponded with their look, but they don't. I mean, the guy with the mic that's singing is blonde, so yeah, it doesn't really work. But anyways, this is a good, solid album. It hasn't gone into my playlist yet. There's already a couple Stones albums in there, so it's on the way up, though, so I'm sure it'll end up there. I think this is going to be a strong Stones album for me. Comes in at number 5 today, though. Okay, the next album up I own, but the cover of the album, which is so iconic, I took it out to clean the album, and when I sat it down, like I took out the front label to clean the inside of the album, the glass part or the plastic part of the album, I sat it down and didn't realize I sat it in the milk, and so it destroyed it completely, so I don't have it anymore. But nevertheless, this album, number 5, this is a bigger jump up now, so you're getting into the next 4 albums are strong, and this one is the beginning of that. The Beatles, Abbey Road, really good album. So many good tracks on this. This, for a long time, this was my favorite Beatles album. It's a move down a little bit because some of the other Beatles albums I've become more familiar. But you got "Come Together," Maxwell Silver Hammer, which is one of my favorite Beatles songs. "Oh Darling," another really good one. "Octopus's Garden," that's the other song by Ringo Starr I like a lot. "I Want You," "She's So Heavy," cool track. "Here Comes the Sun," my favorite George Harrison track. One of my favorite Beatle tracks, actually. "Because You Never Give Me Your Money," "Sun King," "Mean Mr. Mustard." "Mean Mr. Mustard" I like quite a bit. And then some of the other stuff on the other side of it are pretty good too. Overall, solid album. Definitely a step up from "Let It Bleed" at this point in time. But I think that "Let It Bleed" album is going to do some stuff for me. But anyways, this is a really good album. Some people would say it's the Beatles' best. Definitely the cover, which isn't here, is iconic. No doubt about that. So number 4, the Beatles, Abbey Road. The next 3, easily the next 3. Abbey Road could switch places with the number 2 album, but only because this album this was my first of this my second album from this band, but my first of their iconic albums. And I play this a lot. I kind of burned it out. I don't like the sound quality on this album. That's part of the reason why it never does quite as well as it should. We're talking about Led Zeppelin 2. Very iconic album. Many people like this better than any other Zeppelin album. I think it's in my top 5, but I don't think it's near the top. Whole Lot of Love, fantastic tune. It's the tune that brought Led Zeppelin to the forefront with me, but I've burned it out. I don't really need to hear it anymore. What Should Be and What Should Never Be was my second favorite track at that time. It's kind of the same thing, not as much though. Lemon Song, great song. Thank You, great song. Heartbreaker, that was one of the songs on the album I didn't really care too much for. Living Loving Maid and She's Just a Woman, great tune. That's a tune that when I was younger I loved it. It's not so much anymore. Ramble On, maybe, I don't know if it's the best Zeppelin song of all time, but it's definitely right there, and makes this album so strong because of it. Moby Dick, the drum thing I didn't listen to it too much. Bring It On Home. There's a tune that when I had this album, I used to get to the end after Ramble On. I would just end the disc and put it away, and I know, or the album, because I had it in vinyl. I would just take it off and put it away. I never listened to the last two tracks much. The Bring It On Home track, though, is probably the only track on this album now that isn't really suffering from burnout, and I really love this song. Very underrated. I don't know why, but I think maybe it was my taste at the time. Didn't really jive too well with this song. Great album. Sorry, I went over this a lot because this is a fantastic album. So coming number 3, Led Zeppelin 2. The top 2, this one is fairly new to me. Within a year and a half, I've been listening to this. I think it's fantastic. This is a great album from front to start. I'm almost mesmerized when I hear it. Stand Up from Jethro Tull. It edges out Led Zeppelin 2 just because of the newness and experience to me. It's been around long enough that it's not new anymore and strong enough to deal with Led Zeppelin, but not burned out at all. This has some of the best early Jethro Tull stuff. Fat Man, of course, fantastic tune, one of the best. I love it. Looked Into the Sun, I love that. Jeffrey Goes to Lancaster Square. Beret, of course, fantastic song. Yeah, overall, this is a strong album. An album that will only get stronger with me because I'm not burning my albums out anymore. So that's my goal. And this one is such a good album. So I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the only Jethro Tull album with like 4 people playing on it? I know they had one in the 90s, I believe, or maybe it was early 2000s, where there was just 3 members and then some other people playing in on the album. But I think this is one of the earlier ones where there's like only the 4 of them. Anyways, great album. Number 2. Number 1 was easy. It won fairly easily. As soon as I seen it was on the list, I knew it would win. And I couldn't think of any other albums in that year that would have beat it. And of course, it's In the Court of the Crimson King. From top to bottom, awesome. The only song on here that I ever really had any issue with, that I really didn't like initially, was 21st Century Schizoid Man, which I first heard through April Wine, and I never really liked it. I liked April Wine. I just didn't think to me it wasn't a song that suited them, so it kind of didn't play well with me. And so then later I just thought it was the song, but it was actually the combination. I didn't think it was an April Wine type of song, and because of that, they didn't do it the way these guys do it much better. Now I like it a lot more listening to it on here, but I still think the middle 3 tracks, which is the ones that people don't like, Talk to the Wind, Epitaph, and Moonchild, are all just fantastic. I love all 3 of those tunes. Sometimes I can't figure out which one I like more. And The Court of the Crimson King, of course, is just a great song. So this whole album is fantastic. I don't know if it's my favorite Jethro Tull album. Not Jethro Tull. Yeah, I think I've missed something here. The King Crimson album. But it's definitely in that top 2 or 3 mix. I'm only just now working my way through. I'm on the 4th I don't know why I want to say Jethro Tull. The 4th King Crimson album. So I'm playing them because I didn't have any experience with them prior to this channel. So I'm playing them through in chronological order till I can get that kind of experience. I find if you play them chronologically, a lot of the time you kind of get some of that growth that happened as they grew, instead of just picking one here and there, and then you kind of miss out on that. So for me, this is the best album of these 10 albums. Court of the Crimson King from Crimson King. So now we'll just reiterate the 10 song albums again in case people forgot. So we have number 1, In the Court of the Crimson King from Crimson King. Number 2, Stand Up from Jethro Tull. Number 3, Led Zeppelin 2. Number 4, The Beatles, Abbey Road. Number 5, The Stones, Let It Bleed. Number 6, Tommy's from The Who. Number 7 is Hot Rats from Frank Zappa. Number 8 is Yellow Submarine from the Beatles, making the Beatles have 2 now. Number 9, Space Oddity from David Bowie. And last but not least, an album with lots of potential, Renaissance, or their debut album if you prefer. So there you have it. Those are the 10 albums on the Great Album Challenge this week. Rank your top 10 if you want in the comments below from this year. Tell me how you feel about some of these albums. Maybe you love some of them. Maybe you absolutely detest them. That's fine. So you got to remember, people, that albums hit us differently based on how we hear, what emotional state we're in when we're listening to them. Maybe there's something going on in our life and they help us through it. Or maybe there's something going on in our life that just resonates with the albums. That happens all the time. So, give us your opinion on the albums. Please hit the like and subscription. It's much appreciated. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss this content. And we will see you next Sunday night for Ben's album challenge. Ben has an interesting album for that show as well. I look forward to listening to it. And I hope you enjoyed this. We will see you then. Take care and have a good night.